Welcome to another special edition of Daily Airline News focusing on the search for MH370. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and joining me in Germany is my co-host Richard Godfrey. Good morning, Richard.
Good afternoon, Jeffrey.
So today we're going to have a look at our search ships, and then we're going to get onto your questions with a focus on a number of questions on Whisper. But let's start off with Richard giving us an update on Armada 7806 and the Chinese search ship. Richard.
Sure. Um, just wanted to let the viewers know we haven't forgotten about the search ships. Um, and Armada 7806 is heading back to Singapore. It was in Phuong Thao in Vietnam, expected to arrive in 2 days' time on the 4th of May. And it will be interesting to see what its next assignment will be. So we're showing a screenshot of its path back to Singapore from Vietnam. And TSYH is still heading home to China, but is stopped this time in the middle of the South China Sea, in an area where the depth is 4,200 meters, and it's put back yet again its expected time of arrival at the home port of Sanya, um, now by a total of 9 days, pushed back to the 5th of May, and they might well push it back again. The current location is exactly 200 nautical miles offshore from the Philippines and just inside international waters. And this might be regarded by some as more of a political statement towards the Philippines, with whom they have an ongoing dispute about certain territories in the South China Sea, rather than pure marine research. So be interesting to see where TSYH goes next.
Yes, intriguing indeed, and certainly will keep the viewers appraised of where these two ships are. There's a lot of, obviously, a tremendous amount of interest. So let's get on to the questions now. Camping with Ben. Good morning, Richard. Good afternoon, Jeffrey. How unbelievable would it be if MH370 is in the Whisper hotspot? Although, Richard, you have already proven yourself as valuable to the resumption of the search than anywhere else. That'll be proven yourself more valuable. Without Whisper, I would be surprised if a new search got off the ground. You should feel immensely proud. Keep up the good work.
Well, that's very kind words. Thank you for that, camping with Ben. Um, by the way, I'm not planning on coming camping at the moment, Ben. I've got a
Yeah.
lot to do. Um, yeah, we've done a lot of work on Whisper, and we are proud of the work we've done. Um, some of it is quite groundbreaking, and there is more to come. Yesterday, I had an hour-long video conference call with Professor Simon Maskell and to one of his team at Liverpool University. We were discussing their latest research and findings. And we're preparing papers for peer review and publication. So, such research, which is what I'm really focused on and what fascinates me, sometimes it takes years to do. And it also takes months before we can get something peer reviewed and published. So it's a slow process, but I find it absolutely fascinating. And we're getting closer and closer to the moment where we can publish, but it's still a couple of months away.
So William Scott, Hotel 7 Quebec, says, how would the Whisper analysis be affected if MH370 is found outside the area currently indicated? What do you think is the probability of MH370 being outside the current Whisper area? Many thanks for your work on this ongoing story.
Yeah, William, you can never be 100% confident, but I am over 90% confident that MH370 will be found one day. I think it might just take longer than we would like. I have stated a 97% confidence in defining a crash location to within a radius of 30 kilometers. However, defining a crash location is one thing. Actually going out into the Indian Ocean with a ship and with AUVs and ROVs and going underwater and actually finding it is another thing. I'm mindful it's very difficult to search underwater at, depths of 3 and 4,000 meters, and with a very rugged and complex seafloor terrain. If Ocean Infinity go back out in November 2025, and if they do search the Whisper area, I think it's more likely than not that they will find MH370. If MH370 is found outside the Whisper area, then obviously we made a mistake in our calculations at some point, and there are thousands of them. We've missed some data somewhere or made incorrect assumptions, and we would revisit all the analysis to see where we went wrong. I do have great respect for other experts, and they could well be right, and I could well be wrong.
Well, for the record, Richard, I'm 100% confident, and I've been following your work for 4 years, and I think you're right on the money. Now, Sun Trotter, why aren't you yourself more confident and convinced that MH370 will be found in the Whisper target area? You confirmed that you've verified it against thousands of other flight paths and that it works. It's the only method based purely on mathematical calculation and internal consistency. All other possible search areas are much less precise and rely on many assumptions. I am personally convinced that Whisper target area is correct. If the Chinese had truly been clever, they would have investigated the small Whisper target area recently and easily claimed the glory for themselves. Excellent work, and thank you very much for the excellent YouTube videos from both of you. So, Sun Trotter and I agree, Richard. We agree.
Yeah, but I know how complicated it is to define the flight path of MH370 without radar and without ADS-B data, and how complicated it is to define the crash location. And somehow I believe that Captain Patrick Blelly and Jean-Luc Machin would disagree with you because they would say that they are being quite precise. I think experts like Victor Yunello, Bobby Ulick, and Andrew Banks would disagree because they would say they are not making unfounded assumptions and their calculations are internally consistent. So, 100% I don't agree with, but I'm pretty confident that Whisper's got it right, and I'm pretty confident Ocean Infinity or someone else will find MH370.
So another final Whisper question. There's been quite a few of them, Richard. Matt underscore Wright 374. Hi, this question is for Richard. When you first plotted out the flight path of MH370 using Whisper, and you saw the apparent holding pattern over the ocean in a figure 8 pattern, what feelings or thoughts popped into your head? When I saw the Whisper path for the first time, it was absolutely stunning to see the figure 8 flight path and seemed to me to be fantastic proof that MH370 was, in fact, piloted the entire time and that the captain's intent was to make the plane disappear without any witnesses. Thank you for your time, Matt.
Yeah, Matt, a very good point. And I had exactly the same thought. If you think back over the last 11 years, many of the analysts and experts have said for a long time that there was no active pilot on MH370. And I disagree. And for me, flying a figure of eight was proof that there was an active pilot, and right up until the end of the flight of MH370. And that makes a huge difference, having an active pilot, especially when you then move on to what happened after fuel exhaustion. It's one thing to know at what point fuel exhaustion occurred, but then was there a ditching, an attempted ditching, or was it just an uncontrolled crash? I think with an active pilot, it is much more likely that there was then a an attempted ditching that took place. We know from the debris that that didn't work, but it's a different scenario at the end of flight between just purely a vertical dive into the ocean after fuel exhaustion, or an attempt at a ditching where you could be 110 nautical miles from the point of fuel exhaustion. So that was quite a eureka moment for me, Matt.
So we have some other questions from MCYOMO 6297. Thanks again for another Bonanza episode. A serious question from me for once. How far in advance did the captain know who the first officer would be for the final flight of MH370? Reason being, did the experience level and the dynamic between them, teacher and graduate student, give the captain a green light to put his plan into action, whereas a more experienced co-pilot might have noticed things were not quite right and may have had the wits to foreshadow the unfolding events? That's a very interesting question.
Yeah, it's a great question. The airline crews normally have a schedule published for the coming month. And so they get to know which flights they're on, and it is not always clear immediately with whom the names, but they certainly know the number of crews. So some flights are scheduled for four flight crew, a complete uh, two sets of two on longer flights. Some have an extra pilot because it goes beyond the limit for how far, how long a pilot can be in in flight on an aircraft. There's a limit of the number of flying hours in one stretch. And sometimes there are just two pilots because it's a shorter flight. An MH370 was to Beijing designated for two, so that changes the dynamic when you're thinking of hijacking an aircraft to when you've got three or four crew on board. So I think he knew, say, a month ahead that he was going to be on the flight to Beijing with just two crew. And I'm sure he found out that since he was a training captain and the co-pilot Hamid was, say, on his last flight prior to being fully certified on the Boeing 777, he knew a couple of weeks in advance that he had that training flight to do with co-pilot Hamid.
Okay, Regine 4771. Given it's been 10 plus years, one would think the Americans and the Australian military would have some sense of compassion to nudge search efforts to an approximate zone of the final resting spot of MH370, even if this is done through back channels. Are you aware of any efforts to establish such back channel discussions?
Well, we know for a fact there have been certain back channel discussions. We know for sure there were discussions between the ATSB and the FBI, for example. We quite clearly don't know any military secret discussions that might have gone on, for example, between the Five Eyes nations, America, UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. We do know that there were discussions behind the scenes uh, with the French investigation authorities, BEA. We know that there was discussions between the French judiciary and the FBI. So, yeah, lots of discussions going on. Of course, the content of those discussions is hardly ever revealed.
Okay. Dingaling 444, dear Richard and Jeffrey, can you please give your thoughts on what difference it would have made to the pilot of MH370 if the plane had made a controlled landing or not on the ocean, as he must have realized he would not survive either way? And has any medical expert come up with a reason why a pilot who wants to commit suicides decides to do it, taking 239 innocent people with him? Over to you, Richard.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I did spend an entire weekend with a professional psychiatrist who had analyzed MH370 and the captain's behavior. The question, why would someone who wanted to commit suicide decide to take 239 innocent people with them, and why wait 7 hours and 37 minutes of flying time in order to commit either a controlled landing or a crash. The reason that we came up with in our discussions is the captain did not want the evidence to be found. And you have to agree, in the last 11 years, he's been successful in the fact that the evidence has not been found. In terms of the difference between a controlled landing or a crash, well, the obvious difference is that puts the crash location up to 110 nautical miles further away. And so it completely changes and widens the search area. And the assumption in the search areas so far has always been that there was not a controlled ditching and that was a crash close to the seventh arc and to the point of fuel exhaustion. And we haven't found MH370 so far close to the arc. So I think we need to search further afield, and I think it was more likely a controlled ditching.
So from Flowers ATKP1, another great and informative episode. Thank you, Jeffrey and Richard. Referencing to the viewers' questions about what you guys will do um, if the plane is found, then would come the hows and why. So I think you guys will have content on this flight for a very long time. Example would be the Titanic, discovered in 1985, and all of the questions raised for decades since. I wonder if there would be ever a final conclusion to MH370. That's a fascinating question.
Yeah, I think you're right. The discussion will carry on for a long time yet. There's still a huge amount of investigation to be done. There's a lot of data. We pointed out how much data is out there, which we still do not have, which would help. Um, the the Titanic is a very good example of a discussion that has, since the Titanic sunk, it took a long time to discover, and then since the discovery, it's taken a long time to discuss the implications of what has been discovered. So you're quite right. MH370 will carry on for a long time.
So one final question, Richard, from John Clegg 7700. Richard, please will you explain the part played by ordinary amateur radio operators in the operation of Whisper? They have not been mentioned in the dialogue so far. Well, that's not quite right, but did they have an active part in making it work? Did they have to have any special gear to participate? Thanks for all your efforts, Jerry. Golf 3 Uniform Yankee Golf, which is his call sign.
Indeed. Well, thank you for that, Jerry. We have frequently mentioned the very significant role that amateur radio operators have played in the whole operation of Whisper. There are 3 million amateur radio operators in the world, and many thousands use the Whisper equipment and participate in the WhisperNet database. Millions of items of data collected over the years, incredibly valuable data without which any Whisper research and theories in detecting and tracking aircraft would be absolutely impossible. So, um, very clearly, we've done a lot of work on Whisper. We've done several episodes on Whisper. You can see those episodes in the sub-channel in the information below this episode. And I invite you to go and check those out because we track exactly what radio amateurs have contributed. And if Whisper happens to then help in finding and solving the case of MH370, then it's certainly down to thousands of radio operators around the world who have helped with their efforts.
Yeah, they have made an enormous contribution, obviously. Richard, look, thank you once again for all your work and time on answering these questions. Viewers, that's all we've got time for today. Um, Please tune in on Sunday. We're going to be looking at the terrible Erebus disaster, an Air New Zealand crash that happened in 1979, and the debate on that rages on today, particularly obviously in New Zealand, where it really shattered that country. And it was said at the time that most New Zealanders knew somebody or somebody's friend who was on that terrible flight in 1979. But we'll look at it on Sunday. So please subscribe to us. Please like us. Please keep those comments coming. They're fantastic. And please tune in on Sunday. And Richard, once again, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you.